All right. Welcome, everybody, to the 44th episode of the Crypto Mining Tools podcast. And today we're here with our special guest, Scot Johnson. How are you, Scott?
I'm well, Scott. How are you?
Great. Two Scots. So anyway, it's great to have you on here. Scott is actually from Digital Shovel. A lot of people know about Digital Shovel in the crypto mining industry. And so why don't you just tell us a little bit about, Digital Shovel and a little bit about yourself to get started here.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks very much for having us on. Been a long time in the making here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Digital Shovel started around the end of 2017. I got into crypto probably a year and a half or 2 years before that. Started with Ethereum mining, a couple graphics cards and one computer kind of jerry rigged together, and then one rig, and then a room in my apartment, then two rooms in the apartment, then an industrial unit, and we needed to expand beyond that, and decided the best route to go was with a container. We built our first container, and people started to take notice of that. A couple people, that was right during the crazy hype phase. That was, we started that at the end of 2017.
Oh, yeah.
And in through 2018, even though there was the crash, the hype for mining was still intense. And then people started to ask us to build containers for them, and that's how Digital Shovel was formed. We now have a 25,000 square foot facility with full in-house manufacturing capabilities for pretty much everything we build, with the exception of circuit breakers and fans, that really allow us to innovate and bring new products to market quite rapidly.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I know the 2017 crypto bull run was definitely an interesting time, in the industry. I know even things like hosting for miners in traditional data centers or in farms was starting to get scarce and starting to get expensive. And it seems like people just weren't really ready for that bull run at that point. Now is a little bit different. Obviously, there's a lot more options, and like you're saying, containers have really come a long way. It's not anything brand new, but it's definitely a newer part of the industry in general, I'd say. But yeah, so why don't you tell us a little bit about your first container deployment? How did that go? Were there a lot of people doing that at the time? Where did you get your ideas?
Yeah, so the first one was an Ethereum mine. It was relatively simple: 2 fans in a side, and then 4 fans on one side, some louvers in the other, and a rack in the middle, which is kind of what a lot of container manufacturers do right now, which is nothing wrong with whatsoever. And following that design, I wanted to move into ASICs and strive for a little more density and higher efficiency. That's when I came up with the idea to basically shift the shelves perpendicular to create what is now our V shape, or which we've got a pending patent on, that allows you to get unparalleled density and still maintain high airflow and a high level of operator space. Some of our units that are in the field have 2.5 megawatts, and we're actually working on a new 41-foot design that'll have up to 3.5 megawatts in a single unit. And you simply couldn't fit that many miners in a flat wall design with proper power distribution in there. You could do it with all the miners, but you just simply would not have room for all your electrical panels and breakers and power distribution.
Right. Yeah. So like you said, I know in the beginning you really started with just retrofitting shipping containers, right?
Yeah, we started with retrofitting shipping containers, and I found, through last year, as we were wrapping up some of our last 40-foot orders, we were changing so much in the container that the labor we were spending on retrofitting a container was outweighing the benefit of going with a container. We'd also reached the economies of scale where we're buying 20, 30,000 pounds of steel a month. I can now buy the steel so cheap that it makes more sense for us just to build our own units. And we figured we'd start doing that with a smaller structure rather than a 40-foot. And that's how the Minipod came to be, which is our most recent product we brought to market.
Yeah, so that Minipod is, you built that really to be more modular, right?
Yeah, it was to fit two main purposes. One, to be modular, you can bolt them together, and both physically and electrically to make one structure. And then one of the main markets, which has been our biggest customers, is stranded gas plays. It's meant to be able to pick up with a skid steer or forklift, drop it in an oil field. You don't need a foundation or anything else. The unit comes fully assembled, as you see there in the picture. Power distribution, ventilation, security kit, and you can literally just put it on the ground, put your miners in, and hook it directly to a generator.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So, and then I know that you also build some of these containers that are specific, not to hold the miners, but to hold some of the other gear, right? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so in the center of that string that you had on the screen there for a second actually has a switchgear skid. So we make available, you can see there's a small gap there in between 5 of those units. In the ceiling, there's a busway, which carries all the electricity to main breakers. And those main breakers, typically you'd have to have an additional piece of switchgear and a pad put in and conduit run up to that switchgear. That's actually included as part of the unit. So you can just have a separate skid that has all your switchgear. It saves tens of thousands of dollars of installation costs. You can literally put them together, have the entire thing bolt together in an entire day versus, a week's worth of work probably by the time you pour pads and run conduit and all of this other stuff. We are working on as well a separate skid that'll bolt to that'll also hold a transformer with spill containment and everything built in. That's not available to market yet, but that'll be coming out shortly.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So really, what you guys are doing is you're making it's as turnkey as you can possibly get. Like you said, some of your customers are simply plunking these things down in oil fields, right?
Exactly.
So you're trying to make it as easy as possible to get these things up and running for your customers wherever they might put them. So what's some more examples of where these things are being placed?
So there's a mix. I mean, there's regular convention data center plays. So guys will just be buying power from the grid at an affordable rate. Oil and gas production. We have some where they'll be at a peaker plant and they'll do kind of reverse peaking. So with our smart PDUs, we have the ability to remotely control and curtail load based on market rates. So we have several plants, hydroelectric dams in the U.S., where when the power goes above a certain price, they want to be selling to the grid. The rest of the time, it makes more sense for them to mine. So it's the opposite of kind of peak shaving, where you're just using the miners when the rate's low and then selling the power to the grid. So we have quite a few hydroelectric customers that are using them for that application as well.
Wow, yeah, and that's an interesting topic really by itself. When to mine and how to do it the most efficiently and profitably. So well, can you just explain that a little bit? You talked about basically what you're selling the power back to the utility, or how does that work?
So there's a couple different ways you can do it. If you're a generator yourself, you were already selling to the utility whatever you had available. In other instances, say if you're in Texas, for instance, you can program our PDUs to look at what the 15-minute price market rate is. And you say, okay, look, if it's above $5 a megawatt hour as a peak, I want to make sure that I always turn off my miners, and the PDU will automatically do that in 15-minute intervals. You're not always going to be paying $5 a megawatt hour, but that's the upper threshold. If you set that upper threshold, your blended rate might be something like 2.9 cents. Obviously, this is buying at transmission voltages. Different markets operate different ways. Some have day-ahead pricing, some it's settled every 15 minutes. As an example, what just happened with Texas with the storm, if that was an instance and you were not in contract and you were playing market and you didn't get in there and turn off your PDUs in time, you would have ended up with, for most miners, probably a bill that would have been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars higher than normal. The smart PDU would have kicked in automatically and curtailed your load instantly.
Wow.
Instantly. Yeah. I should say that's the important part, is when it curtails, it does it in a soft format. So it'll actually have a small interval of time between each miner shut off and each miner turn back on. So you're not just flipping, a 1, 2, or 3 megawatt switch on and off. It's kind of doing it soft on it / slowly on, slowly back off.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. That's interesting how that works, because we definitely heard on the news how there were some residential customers who all of a sudden got a $17,000 electricity bill in just like a matter of a few days because of the demand rates, right?
Yeah, you can just imagine. I mean, that's a customer that might have $100 or $200 power bill. A lot of miners have 10, 20, 30, $100,000 power bills. So you're talking, 90x what you normally would. It's a big spike. However, most guys that we speak to, a lot of them in Texas, if they are playing the market like that, they're on top of it. If not, they're usually in contract though, so they are protected against that. But for that reason, that's why you're seeing. I mean, there's several utilities and distribution companies that had to file for bankruptcy over this issue in Texas.
Wow. Yeah. No, I can only imagine. So yeah. I mean, about your smart PDU, so it's obviously gone through an evolution over time. I think one feature it has is the ability to identify each individual device, right?
Yeah, so we actually developed the smart PDU fully in-house. So even the printed circuit board we developed, and we have the pick and place assembly equipment in-house to do our own assembly of the PCBs, as well as our own software team. So we're constantly upgrading the software on the miner on the PDU and trying to evolve as much as possible. One of the things we just came out with the way that it can identify which miners are on which port. So like oftentimes you go and plug in a couple hundred miners into your data center. You have smart PDU, which is great, but you're using DHCP or DHCP. You have no idea which IP is on which port. The PDU, I mean, it sucks that it has to turn the miner on and off to do this, but it basically turns miner on and off slowly to identify which IP address was associated with which port, and then it'll map it to that. So when you have an issue, you can just simply go into your PDU and you automatically know what IP address was on there, which one you want to do a reset on.
Yeah, that sounds very handy. Yeah, because I know some of these miners, they could be a little bit hard to control sometimes. The manufacturers really like to lock them down. And so they make it hard to sometimes SSH into them or really do anything outside of a simple API interaction. So that's an interesting feature where it, like you said, it turns it on and off again to identify the IP address and which miner it's mining to.
And it'll only do that if you ask it to. Like not everybody's going to want to sit and have their miners turning on and off. Some guys will use a static IP.
Right.
Another kind of neat feature about it, it has not only temperature and humidity sensors built into the PDU, but there's also Wi-Fi on it, which can be disabled. But sometimes when you're setting up your data center and your network's not all set up, but you want to plug into your PDU to quickly see what's going on with your miners, you can hook in with a tablet or with a phone and just go on through Wi-Fi. It has a wireless access point built into the smart PDU.
Wow, very interesting. And then the cold start feature, is that something different or?
So the cold start feature is you can do it with the PDU alone. It generally works better with the Minipod or in our container products, where if the temperature is below a certain threshold, if you programmed it to say below 15 degrees Celsius, use the cold start. What it'll do is if you have the option of auxiliary heaters, which we offer a ceramic heater option in the container. So if you were your power went down and it's completely cold, it'll wait till the ceramic heaters heat the unit up enough to start the miners. If not, it'll try to start just a small portion of the miners on the bottom shelf. This will hopefully generate enough heat to warm up the rest of them. Not all of them are going to start up properly. And then once that happens, it'll power cycle everything off and then restart up the rest of the miners once they've come up to full heat, or once the data centers come up to full heat, while keeping the fans off at that time.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, definitely. When you're building these containers, you obviously have to consider where these things are actually going to be deployed. So, something like that might not be necessary down in Texas, but obviously you're deploying some of these in more northern areas and colder areas where that might be important.
Yeah, and for that reason, in those climates, we actually have an option for a blower fan that sits in the hot chamber. So once it gets a little bit too cold, the main fan will turn off, or it'll pulse the main fan on and off. while the blower fan is actually blowing hot air from the hot chamber. Our bottom shelf is a 1-inch duct and allows heat to come underneath that shelf. And in some instances, we have a kit that comes with the Minipod and our 40 foots that actually will block some of the intake area. So it's just sheets that go over the filter to restrict some of that air coming in. The nice thing about the awning intakes we have is a huge pile of air can get in. Sometimes it's too much when you're in a really cold climate.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it looks like Jim has a question here. Does the Smart PDU integrate with any mining management software available on the market?
So there is an open API for it. There's authentication, obviously, to get into the API, but we allow API access into it. So if somebody wants to use a third-party software to manage the unit, it's just a matter of them integrating with our API. Right now, it doesn't come factory with anything like that, but we're definitely open to any synergies to, use your existing software, allow you to modify ours, or hook into some third-party software.
Okay. And cool. So yeah, just going back to digital shovel and the market in general. You said back in 2017 everything was going crazy, and then obviously there was the crash of Bitcoin. How would you say that impacted your business? I mean, you were just kind of getting started at the same time, weren't you?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it's kind of funny, and all the guys that work for us are always like, "Oh, Bitcoin's going down. Are we going to stop getting busy?" I'm like, it's fine as we say, like oil and gas, where they say we have sticky margins. We kind of have a sticky volume where it's like when the price is going up, we get really busy, but when it goes down, we just get a little less busy. We've been steady. We've never not had orders. Now, some of that was because, frankly, out the gate when we first started the business, we were quite behind in getting stuff out the gate, just as many manufacturers were. But even through 2020, we did reduce our production capacity because we had to take a lot of staff off the floor, and we still aren't back to our original numbers. We still had orders. In fact, we had orders come in, I think, March 20th of 2020 for 40-foot units. And then throughout, even we launched the Minipods, I think it was in June. Yeah, it was in May or June, and we were selling those units straight through there. I mean, keep in mind, we're doing this all. Toronto is still in lockdown. Like, I know the US is fully open. We don't have restaurants or bars. We only last week, retail stores were allowed to open with 25% capacity. So it's been a very, people are always like, "Oh, what do you mean COVID's slowing things down and slowing down deliveries?" I'm like, you couldn't go to Home Depot to get something when you ran out of it. You had to pre-order everything online. So stuff that would take, a couple days to come takes weeks.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that's an interesting concept, just how COVID impacted the economy in general, but also the mining industry. I think for the most part, people who are buying containers like this, they have the foresight to know that, okay, it's not always going to be like this. Bitcoin in general is going to go up again, and they're not just thinking about what's going to happen this month or in a few months. So they're thinking long term. So I could see how that would, how your orders wouldn't necessarily just immediately drop off just because Bitcoin goes low.
Yeah, that too. And the guys that have been through this a couple times, both of us know that, like, that is the time to build. That's the time to buy miners. Not when a S19 is $12,000, $13,000, $14,000. That's when it was $2,000, $3,000 a little while ago. And most of the guys, if you buy at that price and your power's in the threes, low fours, you were still making money at $3,500, $4,000 Bitcoin. And frankly, it calms things down a little bit. I mean, those are the times to build. I mean, not that now is not the time to build, but given the opportunity, in hindsight, I bet there's a lot of guys right now that are deploying capital that really wish they deployed that capital 6, 9, 12 months ago.
Oh yeah. Now they're going back to their partners or their investors and saying, "See, I told you so. We should have gone. We should have jumped on this." But then everybody gets a little bit more timid. But yeah, the real big players, they know, hey, we have a plan here. Let's stick to it. We're going to weather the storm. And so some of these guys are guys that they don't necessarily need to be selling their crypto every month in order to pay their power bill, right?
Yeah. And the nice thing too is, I mean, this go around, there was tools in place for them to borrow against that crypto, which there really wasn't that low. There were before, but they weren't, institutional grade like there are now. There was so much counterparty risk when you went and did stuff like that before, whereas now so much of the financial structures are in place to allow big players and established players to do things that allow them to float those peaks and valleys a lot better than they could before.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely something that's become a little bit more robust in the last few years, hasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
So, yeah. Well, I guess that kind of dovetails into, I think you were saying earlier offline that you provide some in-house financing options.
Yeah. So originally we were doing a rent-to-own program. We actually it was great because for the longest time I was trying to get our units leased and treated as like like a generator where you can get some pretty attractive financing rates. And now we're finding several leasing partners, well, one main leasing partner rather, that's actually willing to take on our units for oil and gas plays. Now this is just in Canada right now. We're working on a US partner, but they'll finance our Minipod units for oil and gas players as long as they've been around for at least 2 years. At very attractive rates, like normal market leasing rates, not insanely expensive ones like some of the others that were available previously. I need to update my website. I see what's on the screen there, but the rates are a lot more attractive than that for sure. Some of them. I got a guy who's purchased several right now with, I think he's just put first and last down for some of our Minipods, and they can do that for the 40 foot as well.
Yeah. All right. So next topic. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about your manufacturing expansion? I've seen on Facebook and some other places, you've been posting all about this equipment that you've been buying, stuff that I don't even understand how it works, what it is, but it looks like really big metal objects that help to lift things, and I don't know. It seems like you guys are going gangbusters there.
Yeah, lift, press, and cut holes. So when we started, everything was outside. We built our first 40 foots. We had a small little room with a CNC plasma cutter, and everything was outside, including paint in the winter. Wow. It was a challenge, but we got them done.
In the winter in Toronto.
In Toronto, we spent the first part of the morning clearing the snow, and then the afternoon was for the actual building part. It was a challenge. So we now have, I think, 25,000 square foot facility. We recently installed a CNC laser and a 220 ton 12 foot brake press. Our design now, instead of kind of building a frame and putting panels around it, we're really trying to go more like almost like a unibody of a car. So we take the sheet metal, form it into the shapes we need, and add in bends to basically create structural posts within the panels on the exoskeleton of the unit, and just bolt it together and then weld the unit in place. We've installed a robot welder, which is not fully online yet, but it will be shortly, which will really speed up that process. And then most recently, it'll come next week, a CNC turret machine, which allows us to do a variety of things. So like punching and tapping, forming metal in different ways, using a hammer type press into the sheet. And it's mainly things to allow the development of our smart PDU to become a lot more refined. Most of what you see a computer case made, or like all of the forms on a computer case, are made with a turret press. So we have quite a bit there. We also just finishing up now with 2,500 square foot design and development lab. That's going to be for the PCB manufacturer as well as our software team and other electronics based stuff that we want to play with and experiment.
Wow. So, I mean, this all seems to come fairly naturally to you. How did you, I mean, do you have a background in like engineering or?
No, I mean, I surround myself with some great people. I grew up in the country, and when you needed something, you go just always and buy it. He built it. We had a family marina, so I grew up around welders and metalworking machines and stuff like that. And so when it came to the container, I mean, we had trades that were working on them on the first ones that we were building, but slowly but surely, as we learned more and more, we realized a lot of this stuff we can form and fabricate ourselves. But the important part of that is we get everything UL certified and inspected. So it's not just us building it, but willy-nilly and kind of throwing it out there. We have two consultants not in-house, but that work for us, that are ex-CSA inspectors, that consult on our designs, and then we bring the final product to UL, which ensures that we're meeting both Canadian and US electrical standards. Recently, we actually went to, it was a lot of fun, we went to a short circuit testing lab to certify our entire devices. So a lot of devices either don't have a short circuit rating, or it'll be very low, like 2,000 or 5,000 amps, which is the amount of available fault current a device can handle, frankly, before it explodes or before it discharges sparks in an unsafe way. We recently had our PDUs tested up to 50,000 amps, which is, as far as I know, one of the highest ratings for a smart PDU of this size. You can get, I mean, there are other PDUs that carry that high of a rating, but you're talking 5-10 times the price.
Yeah. Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. So we're going to wrap it up here soon, but you know, I was wondering, just the other day, Bitcoin was at around 60,000. I think it actually just reached another all-time high. We just keep on going. What? Go ahead.
No, so go ahead.
Yeah, so I was wondering, you know, do you have any predictions as far as by the end of this year?
I mean, I think I'm ringing the 100K bell like everybody else is right now, to be honest. I also think we're going to have a very large correction. I got to stop calling them crashes. I mean, really, they're corrections. I mean, we still continue to trend up.
Right.
Frankly, I did not think we would be going this high this fast. Did not think these numbers weren't achievable. Just I was pleasantly surprised with the run up as quickly as it happened, but did not anticipate it going up quite this fast. I mean, I can definitely see us seeing 30s again for a little while. 20s questionable, but I could see a correction back into the 30s. But there seems to be a lot of support to bounce it back up. I'm not a trader though. I don't.
Yeah.
Getting into this, I decided early days I'm going to either do mining or the other and not play the trading game. I mean, I guess there's a difference between hedging strategy and stuff like that. But I mean, I try to leave that to guys that's their business, and I just try to focus on the mining side of things.
Oh yeah, no, I mean trading is it's almost a full-time job in itself, really, and you know, jumping in and out of your position, you got to really watch that. Yeah, myself, I'm more of a trader. I sell when I need to, but yeah, I just try to hold. But well, yeah, so
it's been a good play so far.
Yeah. Well, let's hope for that 100K coming up here.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So for our guests, anyone who wants to get in touch with Digital Shovel with Scot Johnson, you can go to his website at digitalshovel.com, right there /contact, and you can fill out the contact form. And otherwise, Scott, where else do you hang out online?
You can email me direct, Scott with 1 T, SCOT at digitalshovel.com. My Twitter is digital_shovel. To be perfectly honest, I'm not on there a whole pile. You can get me on Telegram at the same handle on there on the regular. And then, yeah, our website, digitalshovel.com.
Awesome. Well, Scott, we'll wrap it up here. I appreciate you coming on to the show. And we hope to see you very soon, maybe down in Miami.
I'm looking very forward to Miami. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We appreciate being on. And yeah, Miami's going to be fun this year.
Excellent. All right. Take care, Scott.
All right. Cheers.